Coming to you from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. I am your host, Elijah Ford, and it is time to have a very, very serious conversation. Now, the Toronto Maple Leafs have blown it yet again, yet another Game 7 loss to the Boston Bruins. But just in case your first million Game 7 losses to Boston weren't heartbreaking enough, this one decided to end in overtime, which I can only imagine what those zero point 0.4 seconds were like in downtown Toronto. Now, would I have liked to have been there for it? Yes, I would have loved to see every single one of those sad Leafs fans' faces because, listen, they think they're the epicenter of the hockey world and they are delusional in the amount of success that they think their team is going to have every single year. But we're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about someone who I think has been the opposite of scapegoated. I think the other players on his team have taken so much more criticism than this guy has for reasons that I can only assume have to do with reputation, have to do with his standing in the league. So I want to talk a little bit about John Tavares here and how he has to do with this Leafs run of just disappointment after disappointment as much as any of these other guys do. And the way that he keeps getting away from the criticism of the Toronto media is actually pretty simple. And to explain that, I need to go back to the start of his career where he was drafted first overall. Let's keep in mind, in 2009. He had one of the best junior careers we have ever seen. He became the OHL's leading goal scorer with 215 goals in 247 games. That'll work. He won gold twice at the World Juniors. He was on that team when Jordan Eberle scored that tying goal against Russia. And he was just as blue chip, I should say, as a number one pick as we've seen ever. And maybe not McDavid level, maybe not Bedard level, but just under that. And he got drafted by the New York Islanders. And he came into the franchise when it was in the midst of, admittedly, one of the worst attendance streaks in NHL history. Bottom 5 in attendance since 2003. And for about 3 years there from 2006 on, it was them and the Coyotes fighting for that bottom 2 spot. So he came in kind of like Bedard to the Blackhawks, a historic franchise, the Islanders, one of the first really, really successful expansion franchises, a town which is known for its love of hockey and passion for the game. So he came in to kind of revitalize this sleeping giant. I wouldn't say giant, but they're top half NHL franchise. So he came in his rookie season, and did he light the league on fire? Did the Islanders franchise change around him? Was there an exciting buzz around Long Island like there was for Bedard in Chicago this year? Well, no. He had little to no impact in his rookie season. He came fifth in the Calder Trophy race. He scored 54 points in 82 games. And the Islanders went all the way from the lowest attendance in the league the year before he got there, with an average of 13,773 fans, to the second lowest in the league the year he got there, with an average of 12,735 fans. So you can tell his personality didn't exactly capture the city. But you know what? He didn't come there to restore energy to a whole fan base, although he kind of did. He came there to play hockey, is what I'm sure you're yelling at your screen. So he did develop. He got better and better to the point where by his third year, he was scoring 81 points on a terrible Islanders team. They did not put anything around him at all. He played with Matt Molson for a couple years. He was probably his best goal scorer. I think Matt Molson scored 40 goals with John Tavares, which might be the best accomplishment of John Tavares' career. Just over a point per game for his career, not only with the Islanders, but with the Leafs as well. He's a very, very consistent player. There's no doubt about it. He hasn't really had a down year. His career low, besides his rookie year, the lockout years where he didn't play as many games, etc., is 65, which was actually this season, and his career high is 88. So he's always going to be in between that 70 to 80 point range, which there's nothing wrong with. But this is where the story starts to kind of flip for me. Keep in mind, he's looked at this point as a pretty undisputed top 10 guy, and he's averaging around a point per game. So he does his damnedest with the Islanders. He comes third in Hart Trophy voting one year. He's basically the only guy they have. But he finally realizes that this management team is not good. They're not going to be able to put the necessary pieces around me for us to even have minute success in the playoffs. So as soon as his contract runs out, he signs with his childhood team, and they pay him a bag. Now, before I get into all of the numbers of his cap, let's remember how much the hype was going into this offseason, this July 1st with John Tavares. He was the big fish of big fishes. It was like his draft day all over again. The John Tavares sweepstakes. It was the Sharks, it was the Stars, it was the Leafs, it was the Lightning. They were all just fighting tooth and nail for this top 10 player he was looked at as the time, a point per game guy. And it was looked at around the league, I think fairly, that with these pieces around him, with just above AHL level talent surrounding him, he's putting up near a point per game. Imagine what he could do with a real roster around him, with real offensive pieces, with real goal scorers who he can feed the puck to. Remember, when his contract expired and he signed with the Leafs, he was only 27 years old. He was in the middle of his prime at this point. So as soon as the Leafs signed him, every single person in that town lost their minds. I'll play a few clips here.
Tavares is a Toronto Maple Leaf, and wow, that's
it's amazing. I mean, the sweater will look good on him.
John Tavares is a Leaf! Oh my! Josh Joris is also a Leaf, but you know who else is a Leaf? Is John Tavares!
Like, they really thought this was going to be the move that put them in prime cup contention for the next 8 years, 7 years that he was there. So they paid him 11 mil, 77 mil over 7 years. I apologize, 11 million a season. And he had a hefty signing bonus. He had a no move clause. He had all of that. And the only guy who made more money than him the year he signed was Connor McDavid. Now, keep in mind, there's no really comparison between John Tavares and Connor McDavid. One guy's a point per game guy, one's a generational talent. But people thought so highly of Tavares and what he could do for their franchise that it didn't matter. They were willing to put that all down for him. And let's just see how that move turned out. And that was it. All the pieces in place were for Toronto. Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander. There's your core four. Riley on the defense. And Tavares came into Toronto and gave the exact same production he gave in New York. He's about a point per game. He scored 4 more points with the Leafs than he did the year before he left New York. He just maintained exactly what he did for his entire career, which, like, Leafs fans will never admit this, but it was a disappointment. They were expecting him to be a 100-point guy playing with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. But, again, he just kind of stuck to what he was for his whole career, just under a point per game. But who cares, right, about regular season numbers? He was brought in for the playoffs, for his veteran leadership, to show the kids what it's like to have a winning professional attitude when it matters most. So he has 46 points in 62 playoff games for a career average of 61 points over 82 games in the regular season. So what I'm saying there is, if you were to expand his playoff numbers into a full season, he'd have an average of 61 points, which would be near his career low. And again, 5 points in 7 games this season for the Leafs. Now, for the past few playoff series they've had, he's been okay. He's been just about where he was for the regular season. He's just under a point per game. But he was never really part of the problem. You know what I mean? It was always put on Marner, Matthews, the young kids, because they hadn't quite developed or had the reputation as sterling playoff players, which he somehow got just off of his boring, smaller than life personality of just like the regular hockey guy. Somehow that gave him the reputation as this cool, calm, and collected playoff player when Matthews and Marner hadn't yet established that. So all the pressure, not the pressure, the criticism, some of the pressure, all the criticism went to them. So he was always just kind of there. He was never a problem, but he wasn't really part of the solution until this year. He had 2 points in 7 games against Boston, guys. He looked lethargic throughout the entire series. I noticed him maybe 5 times out there in a 7-game series. I watched these games close, and the impact that he made to me was next to none. In the game 4, which was the turning point of the series, the kids are collapsing. Everyone's yelling at everyone. Marner's not playing well. Matthews doesn't even know what's going on because he's so sick. They need their veteran captain to step up and make some plays. He has 0 points and 3 shots in 19 minutes. Now, listen. This whole John Tavares thing, I have the utmost respect for his career, what he's done. I think he's an unbelievable talent, probably a Hall of Famer in the future. What my point is, the signing of John Tavares for, again, $11 million. He is still the 9th highest paid player in the NHL. You can't give the 30th to 35th best player in the league that kind of money. And it's not looked at as an issue because it's been on their books for so long that people have just kind of forgotten about it. But John Tavares is definitely part of the problem here, guys. He makes just as much as Marner does, and yet it comes with none of the criticism. When Pettersson on the Canucks has a couple bad games, everyone reminds him of his contract. But when John Tavares is nothing but average at best for 5 straight playoff series and craps the bed in what is one of the most heartbreaking series in Leafs history, his contract never gets brought up for whatever reason. Now, should they move him? Well, they can't. He has a no-move clause until next year, and then his contract's off the books, as well as Marner's. So that's the year that the Leafs are really going to be able to make some change. But the John Tavares signing, it cannot be looked back on fondly for Leafs fans anymore, unfortunately, which is so crazy to think about considering their reactions when it first went down. John Tavares is a very, very good hockey player. And he's also an anchor that has been weighing this Leafs team down ever since he signed there. As always, I want to know what you guys think. Am I nuts? Is this take just wildly out there? Leafs fans, tell me, what do you think about John Tavares and what he's done since he's been on your squad? As always, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We've just reached over 200 subscribers on the Spit Sports Show, which I am so grateful for. Leave a comment. I am small enough as to where I can read all comments, and I love doing so, so please leave something down there. And please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard. And as always, I will see you next time. Peace out.